Hi guys and welcome to another video. We will discuss about how you can apply UiPath best practices. Now in this video, we have invite another UiPath MVP, which is Mukesh Kala. And I have received your feedback and I want to make these videos more with a lot of examples. So what we'll do here in this video, we're gonna build a project, a producer and a consumer. We're gonna not focus on the implementation, but instead of applying the UiPath best practices. His best practices. So I want to share with you what are the Mukesh best practices. And because I want to make this video easy to be seen, even if it's longer, I have put here in the timeline some bookmarks in order to be easily stick with the best practices. I don't want to waste your time. Let's jump directly to the video. Hi Mukesh, and thanks for accepting the invitation
Thank you, Daniel.
to share the best practices.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel, for the invitation.
Let's tell the audience just 2 minutes about you. Where are you coming from? What's your background? And how do you landed in the UiPath world?
Okay, so my name is Mukesh Kala. I have a total of 7 years of experience. That includes initial 2 to 3 years in .NET and rest of the experience in UiPath robotics RPA technology. So I started my career as a .NET developer, and in one of my previous company, that was Deloitte, I got an opportunity to work for a small project in RPA, and then I found it interesting, and I thought that this is the thing what I need to do. This is very interesting. It grabbed my interest, and I shifted my career from a .NET developer to a full-time RPA UiPath developer. As of now, working for Accenture.
Great. So we're having something like similar backgrounds because I'm coming from the .NET world also.
Yes.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Let's share a bit. I mean, the purpose of this discussion is just to share about the best practices that you are applying. So would you like to share more about the UiPath best practices that you are applying, and why do you apply them?
Yeah, definitely. I'll be happy to do that, because whenever you are dealing with a project, so that the best practices not only help you during the development, but also post development also. Whenever the defect is coming, whenever a new developer is coming. So best practices is a must to follow whenever you are doing robotics automation, or for that matter, any kind of project.
But first of all, why do you use these best practices? Let's make like a recap. Why do you find it valuable?
Okay, because for example, if you are not, I'll tell you if what happens if you are not using the best practices. So so should I do that? Okay, so why should we use the project best practices? Because to first of all, to optimize the code, to make the code readable, to make the code easy to understand. In case someone is debugging your code, he or she should be able to understand the code, what is the purpose of the code, and to increase the efficiency, to increase the execution time. For all of these things, best practices are required.
Good. So let's share a bit of these best practices.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you want to start? So let me start with the project organization first.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, so if you are able to see my screen, can you see my screen? Right?
Yes, I can do that. I can see your screen.
Okay, so this is a simple robotics project open in front of me. Okay, so if I go to the project, so the first thing, if I go in the open project folder, so this is the project folder which is open in front of me. Okay, so this is what I mean by a project organization. That means that each and everything goes in the correct folder. For example, if you look into my screen, you will see that all, if I ask you, Daniel, where exactly are the exception screenshot? Right, can you tell me where exactly are the, which folder is for exception screenshots? You can always tell me that it's here, right? But what if I tell you, you go to this folder and tell me which XAML exactly is storing the Excel screenshot? Can you tell me? You can't, right?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Right, so that is why first thing is the structure of the project. So the structure of the project, how do we decide? First of all, this what you are looking on the screen is the robotics enterprise framework, which is provided by UiPath. And if you will see, UiPath itself is providing the best practices. For example, if you will see, all the framework related stuffs are in one folder, which is in folder framework. All the data related thing is inside the data folder, the config input output. All of the things which are related to the documentation is in the documentation folder. Right now, as a developer, assuming that I always had an option to do it like this, I could have coded it like this. But what happens when you go with this structure inside a UiPath Studio? So let me just go here and refresh. You will see every XAML is just lying outside, right? So this is difficult to manage. That's why it is important to have a project structure. Now talking about the best practices of the this project structure, each of the functionality which is related to one thing should go in one folder. For example, all these things are related to the framework, so drag and drop inside a folder. For example, okay, I cannot do that because it's already existing. I have just cut paste, so let me just remove this one. Okay, so all of the things which are related to framework should go in framework, right? And in the main, you should only have one file that is called the main.xaml, because this is the starting point of the project, and the process, because this is the place where you put all the init, all settings and all those things. Apart from everything should go in the respective folder. Now you will think that what if I want to do, assuming that you are writing a process where you have to dump a data, right? So to dump a data, assuming that you are writing 5 XAMLs, so first of all, what I will do is I will go here, I will create a new folder, I will add a new folder like this, and I will create this folder, let's say extract data. Now it is very important to follow the naming convention here. What you can do is you can always follow the project name and the functionality which you are trying. You don't like right like this, data 1 or data 2 not accepted, right? You should follow a name that, for example, which you can at least later refer, so such as extract, extract data. That way, now whatever XAMLs you create to extract the data will go inside this folder. So that is how you organize your project structure. Now we will see there's something, there are dependencies, so always try to minimize the dependency which you are not using. So assuming your automation does not require the Excel dependencies, you can always go ahead and remove the dependencies. So that is how you manage the project structure.
Okay, so how do you use what are the strategies which are using to give the names for folders, for instance, and for processes? You
Okay,
have
so
given the example extract data, but
yeah,
how do you design this? It's related to features, is related
yeah.
to what's the strategy behind?
Okay, so now that, see, for example, whenever you are doing, larger part of the automation, so you always have two parts. One is the dispatcher, and other is called the performer. So basically, you can just define it as one bot who is putting the data somewhere and one bot who is pulling the data, right? So what
Okay.
you can do is, first of all, you just have to decide that what functionality are you creating the automation for. As a developer, you are always aware that what is the functionality I am creating for. For example, you are writing an automation where you have to just extract the data from a website, download it, and put it in a folder, right? So what would be the good way to put everything outside, or to create a folder which says extract data? Let me just go here, I will just rename it, let's say extract data and store, right? So that way you would be able to see. And one more thing what you can do is you can always use the numbering. So which is this step in the automation, assuming that this is my third step, right? So I can
Okay.
put a 3 here, right? So that means by looking at the folders also, you can see that, okay, this is the third step, this is the fourth step, this is the fifth step. And if there are multiple folders, then you will be able to buy this number. So this is the third number of step where I am extracting and storing the data. Now whatever XAMLs you create, so I will create a new sequence for that matter. And what is this sequence for? So this sequence is for, let's say, extract data. And then what you are doing here, I am just opening the web app, right? So I will create that
Okay.
sequence. Now this XAML, if you will see, this is lying outside, right? So now
Okay.
imagine you keep continuing creating the XAML, right? It will be difficult for you to manage. So best thing, just move it to this folder
Okay,
like
so
that.
you're
Yeah,
somehow you're giving to the folder, the name of the folder should contain two things in your opinion. Should contain the order in the process
yeah,
and what it's doing exactly. In this one, it's extracting data and store.
right, right.
But
And next, assuming that you have extracted the data and open the web application, next you want to create one more XAML where you want to just store the data. Now why I am creating multiple XAML, right? I could have stored everything in a single XAML also, right?
can we have like a dummy process just for the viewers? Because
Mm,
extract data, store data, maybe they could seems a bit of abstract for most of the users. So
okay,
can we
yeah,
just take an example? I don't know.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yes, yeah,
you can come with an idea about the project, or I don't know, we can
Okay.
invent just some which involve some
Yeah. I
customers,
can.
some CRM.
Yeah.
Uh, Feel free to share whatever you're comfortable with.
So you just open the email, you read the emails. In the body, you will find the invoice number. Now, for all the invoices, wherever the invoices number is valid, invalid, you just get the invoices. So next, you open the browser, type the credential, input the invoice number, save the data, and exit.
Okay, so we are building a robot that it's reading
Mm.
some emails,
Mhm.
getting some invoices, and it posts it to a web application. Let's say,
Right.
okay?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Does
thanks.
it make
That's
sense?
it. Actually, it makes perfect sense. But I want to
Uh-huh.
establish like a context,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
behavior context, not actionable context. What's the behavior of the robot? That's perfect.
I got it. I got it. I exactly got it. What you want me to do. So we no need to talk about the all the best practices one by one, but all the best practices building this automation. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are going through the
Mhm.
all the best practices, how you
Yes.
would
Yes.
apply about the project
Yes.
organization
Okay.
and
Okay.
all these
Okay.
kind of things.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. So let me start fresh then. You. It would be easy for you to cut. Okay. So I will start once more. So, assuming that this is the automation which we have to build, the automation would have to read the emails. First of all, it has to open the email mailbox. So, in our case, it can be Outlook or any of the email servers which is configured on your machine. Next, the bot has to read the email. In the body of the email, you will find a invoice number, and once the invoice number you are getting is valid, you get the invoices number. Now once you have all the invoices number 3, 4, 5, or 6 for that matter, next for with those invoices you will open the browser, you will type the credential, you will input the data. Now this data will be nothing but the invoice number. You will save the data in the browser and exit the portal. So assuming that this is the kind of automation which we are building in UiPath Studio, how would you build it and what would be the best practices here? Okay. So first of all, if you will see, these are two parts, right? So the first part is only getting the data. It's only about getting the data, right? So in the UiPath terminology, we call it dispatcher. Okay.
Okay, so we
And
are we are
yeah,
splitting this process in two parts, right?
two parts, right? Correct.
Okay.
So first one is called the dispatcher, and the second one is called the performer. Because why it is called performer? Because it is the place where the actual business logic is happening. Right? It is not happening here. You are just getting the data and putting it somewhere as of now in the invoices, and then this is the place where the actual business logic is happening. So first of all, I have divided this into two parts. One is called the dispatcher bot, and other is called the performer bot. So the job of the dispatcher would be just to read, open Outlook emails and get us the list of invoices. That's it, and it will stop, right? Next,
Okay.
there will be one more bot which is called the performer bot, where you will just open the browser, type the credential, and the performer bot will only expect a invoice number from anywhere. It can be your Excel file, it can be your dispatcher, or it can be your queue. From anywhere, it just requires a invoice number. That is it. Okay.
Okay.
So now what is the benefit you see here? So the first benefit is you can test the performer individually. You can give this code to two separate developers to develop. You can give this performer bot to one guy and this dispatcher bot to one guy. You have to just specify that when the performer bot is running, you have to just expect a invoice number. That's it, right? Now the second developer can always use the invoice number in an Excel, and you can perform and develop his bot, right? Whereas the other developer can work on the dispatcher thing. And this is how the first part of the segregation will happen: dispatcher and the performer. Understood?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Should be.
Actually,
Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna
Mm.
cut from here.
Yeah.
So I have just finished to edit a video about dispatcher and performer. What are the
Mm-hmm.
advantages?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna. I truly agree with you on this
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Probably I'm gonna make a reference to it. I'm just gonna post it. I'm gonna make it publish. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think just about what after we have it, just
Mm-hmm.
after we'll having this call, just like a
Yeah.
parenthesis.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So this is clear. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay. Fine. So the next step comes that when which type of project we should decide, right? So the if I go to the UiPath Studio, you will see the UiPath has provided many things there, right? But since we are dealing with an enterprise level project and where a lot transactions are involved, so if you will see the invoices number is not single, right? Here you will have multiple things. Here you will have multiple invoices, correct? So you want these transactions to happen in kind of a loop. So whenever you are having a transactional process, see, you will see this template is provided by UiPath, which says that create a transactional business processes to scale this one. So this perfectly suits my need. Now the first thing comes here, what is the name that you want to put, right? So if you will see, assuming that my process, the name of my process is let's say SAP data insert maybe. So assuming that this performer is doing something on the SAP thing, it's opening the SAP thing on the browser and then it's doing, right? So SAP data insert. So first thing is the name. So the name of the project should match. So first of all, assuming that we are writing a process for the dispatcher, so what we can do there is you can just write here dispatcher, okay, underscore, what is the process name? The process name is SAP. And if you see, I am following a camel case. So
Mm-hmm.
it is not good, because if it is difficult to read, if you will like this, right? But rather if I just put it like this, okay, SAP, and let's say like this, get and invoices, sorry, my bad, invoices, make sure of the spelling correct. So dispatcher for SAP and then the get invoices, right? Now the next thing important, we often skip this part, that description. So always give a good description. This is the dispatcher bot, okay, this is
Okay.
the,
Okay.
you can just give a nice description that this is a, this is a dispatcher bot, okay. So you can just
Okay.
write the further that this is a dispatcher bot will who will just pick the items and put it on the queue and then select the correct language and hit create. So as soon as you create it, first thing is you will get a framework which is readily available, ready to use by robotics
Okay.
enterprise template by UiPath, okay. So now here what you can do is, you first of all you will see there is a documentation which is provided, right? So if you are using this REFramework, and what would happen is I would recommend that you just delete this or you just cut and paste it some other location. Reason being, whenever you publish this package to the orchestrator, this entire thing goes in the with the
Mm-hmm.
package. So you don't want to have this documentation, right? You can keep it for your reference in some other location, otherwise you can just go ahead and
Okay.
remove this, right? Because this here documentation is given by robotics enterprise framework so that developers can easily refer. But since you are already creating, I hope you know the all the things about the documentation. But rather it wouldn't be good to put everything on the nugget, because it will increase the nugget size and all, right? Why to unnecessarily put. Now important thing here is the configuration file. So this is the config file, and this you can see is the heart of the automation. So here what happened, the first thing you have to do is, create your config. So first thing is the configuration file. Now in the config file we put the things which you think will change in the future and might change in the future, or whatever things you want to make it configurable. So if I go to my example, okay, so if you will see, open the email and Outlook, right? So for example, today your company is using Outlook 2010, right? Tomorrow your company migrates to Office 365, right?
Okay.
So you don't want to come always and change the automation, because you don't want to come and again change the automation, because you have hard coded it here, right? So because now if I talk about the configuration, what all things I see as a configuration in this part, open the email, the first one would be the which part of the email, which version of the Outlook you are using, 2010 or Office 365. So the path of the exact path or the version can be a thing which can be maintained in the settings, okay. So assuming that I create an key here for Outlook path, okay, so that Outlook path will be the exact path of the Outlook which is available on the machine. So for example, as of now, I let me check with if I have Outlook. Yeah, I have Outlook. So I'll go to the, how do I go to the properties? I can shift
You
right
need
click.
to definitely after you started, if you started the Outlook, if you started.
Yeah, okay.
App
I don't know
settings,
whether.
maybe app settings, right click.
Yeah. So you got it, right? So I
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
pass the exe path. So assuming that I'm just passing a dummy path here,
Okay,
like,
okay, okay.
so this is assuming that your Outlook path. Okay, now what is the benefit I get by using this guy? Okay, so the benefit which I get is in future, if this path changes, I don't have to do and change to my code, right? I can always come here and change this Outlook path and it will trigger the process. So first thing is think and decide that whatever the things you require can change in future. So if I go back to my example, yeah, this one. Any you
Okay.
want to say something? Yeah.
Now, I was
Hmm.
asking, why do you need a path for Outlook, especially? Not, I mean, I totally agree that
Hmm.
you need some configurable thing, but for
Yeah.
specifically for Outlook, maybe you tell for the viewers
Yeah. Because
why
see,
you would
let me.
like, yeah,
Okay. So before we start any automation, so we always want the environment to be clean, right? You don't want
okay,
the environment to be hung up. So for example, if you will see, currently my Outlook is stuck, right? Something unexpected thing might happen when the robot is running in the production environment. So what would you feel? Should I clean the environment or should I not clean the environment? What do you say before running any process?
so I think it's really depending on the assumption that you start the process.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
So
I mean,
so as
these
yeah,
are the part of the prerequisite, I think,
yeah,
and
correct.
yeah,
Okay, so my
I'm
Outlook.
curious your best practices, so
Yeah,
how you
yeah,
would do that.
yeah, yeah. So as of now, I see, assuming that this is my Outlook and this is had uh, given some unexpected error, and once you run the process on the production, you will see that okay, the Outlook hasn't stuck. So as a best practice, it is always good to kill the Outlook at the beginning and to restart. So assuming in our process we are interacting with Outlook, we are interacting with the browser, and we are interacting with I think save the data in Excel, right? Maybe we are saving the data in the Excel, right? But what
Okay.
happens if the Excel is not responding, or the browser is not responding, or the emails is not responding? So it will break. So the first thing, it would be better if you kill the process. Now to kill the process, there is an activity in UiPath which is called the kill process. Okay, so this is the activity kill process, and the kill process expects the path of the process. That's why I am keeping this path here. Now that answers your
Okay.
questions.
Yes, as far as I know, your kill process only accept the process name.
Yeah,
Maybe it accepts the path.
yeah. No, no.
I didn't know that.
No.
Yes.
Let me just complete. So once you have killed the process, okay,
Okay.
how would you restart the process again?
Okay, I get it. But okay, I get
Yeah.
that. I get that. But when you're gonna start the reframework, the kill
Mm-hmm,
process, it's not called by default. I mean, for the viewers, the
mm-hmm.
reframework, the framework that we are using right now,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the process it
Mm-hmm.
starts the
In it.
um oh on the in the kill in the you're right. Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So there is something called initialization, and
Yeah,
initialization in the first run you would have
yeah,
all
you're
these
right.
settings, and then it will kill the process, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just keep about the reframework because this is already built in. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so first of all, we wanted to have a clean environment. So for that clean environment, assuming that I have killed the process. To kill the process, I have used an activity called kill process. It will kill the process. Now, to read the emails or to do any of this thing, you would have to reopen the application. So to reopen the application, we use an activity called the open application. Correct.
Yeah.
Now the open application, in the open application, if I just drag it here, something like this, you will see, sorry, my bad, not the open application. You can use this one also, that not an issue, but uh, start application actually. Dik, 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 dik.
Process
Open
start, I
application
think it's.
start, yeah, start process, this one, right? So
Mm,
here it requires the executable path. So it is better if you put the executable path of the Outlook here. For
okay.
example, if tomorrow you are using 2010, you have to just start the 2010. But tomorrow if it's Office 365, you would have to change the path of the Office 365 because the installation directive will be different. Correct. So
Okay.
that's why it's good to store this thing in the config file. Now
Great.
the next thing, read the emails and the body. Now the question arises, I have simply told read the emails, right? Now reading the emails, what all things you can think of configuration, right? Sender,
Uh, yeah,
right?
maybe
Yeah,
the
the
and
folder,
the yeah
Outlook
the
folder. Yeah.
yeah yeah
Okay, so the Outlook folder which you want to refer. Okay, now the sender. and the subject. Okay, the sender, subject, this, and based on this you will be able to differentiate whether this is the correct email or not. If you want, we can always have more attributes, like if you want to find specific kind of attachment in the process. For example, is in our process, assuming that you want to strict that it should only download the PDF, so I can always have an attachment count here. And you can always have one more thing, that attachment type, right? So that
Okay.
means that I can always specify here, whenever I am reading this process, whenever I'm reading this process, I am expecting an attachment count of 4, and I am expecting the attachment type only for PDF. Then only you read this email or download the attachment, otherwise you just skip. So what is this advantage? Tomorrow if the business changes, you say that now the attachment count
Okay.
has increased or decreased to 6 or 7, you can just come here and do it like this. Now,
Okay.
one more best practice, whenever you introduce the key value pair, write the description, right? So what is this? This is my path for Outlook. Okay. What is this? This is the sender for the email. What is this? The folder we want to refer. So folder you want to read. Okay. All
Okay.
these things you should put. Excuse for my, so there should be no spelling mistakes. So I am doing that, but
Yeah,
I
no,
hope you
no, this,
understand the context,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
okay.
So
So
this is, yeah.
this is a part of how you define these configurable keys for your
Mhm.
dispatcher process.
Correct, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So now that, assuming that you have got the read the multiple emails, you have everything, we have got the attachment type, PDF, 6 PDF. Now what do you want to do? So if you will see this process, this closely is working and following, going towards the queues. So the best implementation would be to use queues. So when I say queues, I mean the orchestrator queues. So what will happen ideally, that whenever this dispatcher is running, it will just read each and every data and put the data in the queue. So it will put the data in this queue, assuming that this queue is called input queue. Okay. Now this input queue will be again input for the performer. So where exactly the queues detail come in? So if you will see at the top,
Okay.
UiPath has already created this thing for us. Can you see orchestrator queue name? So
Yeah.
if you are using a queue name, just put it here. So process ABC queue. So you can just put like
Input.
process SAP
Okay.
input queue. Okay. So orchestrator queue name. Apart from this, there are other settings such as constants. So things which are constant throughout, for example, the exception screenshot path, some delays. So for example, uh, you want to put a certain delay. So whenever we are doing a web application, right, sometime it happens that it is taking time to load. So we often use delay before, delay after properties. So those delays can come here. Okay. And you can just specify the delay setting. Now there is something called assets. So if you are using the orchestrator, all the important assets, such as, for example, in our case, this we'll talk about the asset when I come to this guy. But as of now, you can just think whichever assets we want to create, we come and give the name of the asset here, orchestrator asset folder, the description, and this is just directly ready, plug and play. So that is all about the first thing which you will do in the config as far as dispatcher is concerned. Okay. So
Okay.
assuming that you are done with the config things you have, and the best part, you can always go and revisit, remove, and
Yeah,
delete the
so
things.
the
Yeah,
definitely the REFramework has some keys.
yeah,
Yeah, we should definitely adjust them according to
mm,
your
yeah,
requirements.
yeah,
I have a one last question. Can you
yeah,
open the notepad?
yeah.
So for the dispatcher, you open
Mm-hmm,
the email in the initial process, you kill,
mm-hmm,
you put a
mm-hmm,
configurable thing, you start
mm-hmm,
process, you are using the activities built in UiPath, which are reading from Outlook.
yeah,
And then I guess in the get transaction data, you are reading the
mm-hmm,
emails. And then
mm-hmm,
in the process, I'm not going to discuss how REFramework works.
mm-hmm.
We are assuming that our viewers, they know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then in the process, you will start to do for each mail or
Mm-hmm.
per each attachment.
Right.
Let's put the use case. You're gonna have
Mhm.
three emails, right? And
Okay.
each email will have, I don't
Mm.
know, will vary the amount of the
Attachments.
attachment.
Right,
Okay,
right.
one of them will have one, two, and
Mm-hmm,
so on.
mm-hmm.
How you would execute the process based on the email or based on the attachments?
Okay. So first of all, if you will look at this thing, right? So at the end, what we want, so we want to have the invoices. Now, one thing
Yeah.
also that reminds me a good thing here. So for example, what happens if your criterias are not matching? Okay, so what happens that for today, let's say for Friday, you just triggered a process and you are not getting an attachment count of 6, right? Or you are not getting an attachment count of 3 for that matter, and no PDF. So whom should you intimate, right? So there would be always some guys which we say the business exception. So now I am just moving a little bit towards exception, that where whom should the bot intimate if these conditions are not matching. Okay, so for example, that today you run the process and you found that you didn't get anything to process, right? So at least the bot should intimate someone, right, that for today I don't have anything. So for that you will always have keys here: business exception email, then whom do you want to send the email to, the subject, and the body, maybe that what exactly is the body, and all those things again would be configurable. Reason being, today the business is having 3 guys, tomorrow they increase or decrease to 5 or 10. You don't want the email to go to everybody, so you can just use this property and put a semicolon and separate the values here. Okay, so now whenever this criteria is not matching, we will just send an email to the business exception, and whenever
So
there is some, yeah, please.
yeah, let's consider. Yeah, you're right. Okay,
Mhm.
definitely. If there is an exception, we will send an exception. This is a really good thing. Actually,
Yeah.
this is not what I was referring. I was not trying to be outside the nominal case.
Okay.
So let's say the attachment is not a fix of 3, it's
Mhm.
attachment minimum. We have a
Okay,
minimum
okay,
account of 3 or 1.
okay,
So I'm
okay.
not, that's why I don't want to discuss about the exceptions now.
Mhm, mhm.
I
Okay,
was still to the nominal case. My question was actually not referring to the exception. Was the case you
okay.
have 3 emails,
Mhm.
and let's say our robot it needs a minimum amount of 1 PDF attachment.
Right.
And among these 3 emails, one of them it's having 1 PDF. The
Mhm.
second is having 2 PDFs. The third, I don't know, maybe having 1 or 2. So it's definitely part of our nominal
Right,
case.
right, right, right.
My
Okay,
question was actually how you would execute the process based on email or based on attachments. The process
okay.
that XAML, because in
Mhm,
the get transaction data, if you're
mhm, mhm,
gonna output 3 results,
mhm.
these will be the email, then the process will be executed 3 times.
Right.
But in
Got it.
my
Got it.
case,
Got it.
because I have 3 emails, one
Mhm,
of them has 1 attachment, the other one has 2. So 1 plus 2, 3.
mhm,
And
mhm.
the third email, it's maybe 2 emails.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
having
yeah.
five five items, right?
Okay,
So what's the amount of items that the get transaction data it outputs? So based on
okay,
that, the process will be executed. Was
okay,
it
okay.
clear now?
Yeah, yeah. I got it. I got it.
That
So
that's perfect.
assuming that I have received multiple emails, and multiple emails will have multiple attachments, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we have
exactly.
specified the count here, that the attachment count expecting I am minimum of 3 attachment I'm expecting. So
Yeah.
first, assuming that for the 3 emails, the first one is having 2, the second one is having 1, and the next one is having 3. Total of 6 emails. Now what the bot has to do, it has already matched the subject, it has already matched the attachment count, it has matched the attachment type, and what else you can do, you can always have an attachment name also, wherever the attachment name is, like, invoice or input. So it will check whether if it is matching this criteria, the attachment type or the name is having input, it is having an extension of PDF, it is going to consider that one, either if it is 1 or either it is 3. In our case, all the 6 invoices will be added to the queue,
Okay.
individual items, 6 items to the queue.
So, yeah, definitely there will be 6 items in the queue,
Yeah.
but what should be the result for the get transaction data? It will be 3 emails or it will be 5 actually, I said, but you can say
Yeah.
6 because I said
Okay.
1 plus 2 plus another 2
Mhm. Okay. So
among these 3 emails.
okay. So here for the get transaction data, it will have 6 transaction items, and the six
Okay.
transaction items will have these details.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I get it.
No email is getting to the transaction. You will have 6 six transaction, only six transaction, which will have this data like sender, receiver, attachment, and the invoice. That's it, invoice number, right?
Okay.
So okay, so assuming that now you are having all this structure. Now, if you will see, we have made all the things configurable, everything. Now, if you will look here, what exactly we are doing here, right? So we are just reading the input, email, get the invoice. So if you will see, can I divide this one? Yes, I can definitely divide, because these two things are related to the Outlook, and this guy is related more to more of to the getting the saving the invoices and getting the invoice number. So what I will do here in the project folder, first of all, I will create a folder, add a new folder, which I will say, what is this one? So I will say SAP
So now we are
input.
going back to the subject.
Right, yeah,
Project organization. That's the first topic.
right. So
Okay.
SAP read inputs. Okay, so I will create a folder like this. Okay, now here, if first of all I have created a folder, now the next thing is what I have to do. I have to read the emails, right? So I will go here, create a new sequence, and I will say read emails. Okay, and you can just add more details, that read emails from the sender or read emails from the SAP maybe. Okay, so now this all these XAML which are related will go in this folder. It will not stick outside, you have to keep it inside like this. So that
Okay.
way, if I ask you that where exactly I can get all the all the XAMLs related to the SAP read inputs, you can always say that okay, this is the folder, and go here and you will say that this is the place where you are reading the email. So I will just read the emails here. Next, what I wanted to do, I want to get the invoices, right? So I will create one more XAML which I call the get the invoices. Okay, so
And where do
assuming
you
that
get these invoices?
get
So
invoices from,
now you don't need to tell the name. I was just asking you.
no no
So
yeah, so I'm just so this is get invoices from the emails. Okay,
okay, okay, I get
yeah.
it.
Okay, so first thing is get invoices from emails. Now, what will you do in the get invoices from emails? In the get invoices from the email, you will just use all these conditions, that what are the conditions that I have to use to get the emails, like attachment name, attachment type, attachment count. And once everything is done, what you want to do? You want to save all the relevant attachments. So let me just go ahead and create a thing like, or we can just add items, or I can just say that create the queue. Okay, create the queue items. Okay, so let me talk about all this now, what how this will execute. Okay, so assuming that we have created the three project structure, so this one I will put it here again, and I can this again put it here. So as of now in my dispatcher I only have one functionality, but if you are having one, two, three, you can always go ahead and put the numbers here, right?
Okay.
So as of now I am just using it to read the email. So first of all, what will happen, it will first read the email. So as of now, if I ask you that which one will execute first, it is difficult to read, right? So what, again, you can always go here, rename, and you can do it like this, that first it will read the emails. Okay, the next thing it will go is,
Okay. So you're actually using this approach to having the name in the file.
yes. So
Okay.
that way by looking at only the folder structure. Now, if I ask you, Daniel,
Okay.
tell me which one is executing first, right? So you can just tell me that
Okay.
this XAML, then this and this. You can always go inside the flow, but if everything is visible at the project structure, then it's always good, right? So in the
Okay.
read email from SAP, I will just open the XAML. In the read email from XAML, if you will see, what all things I require to open this, right? First one is I need an argument, right, from the config. So the first thing is I would require a config object. So first of all, it is now
Okay.
I am coming to the variables and the naming convention here, right? So
Okay.
the in UiPath we have arguments. When I say we have in, out, and in, out, so the best practices is give the direction. So if you are
Okay.
expecting something, so always write in underscore config. For example, why I'm passing here config, because to read the emails I have to open the Outlook, and where I have specified the Outlook part in the config. So I definitely need a config object, and the
Okay.
argument type is important, because now as we know that the config object will be of type dictionary, right? So always use the correct here, so it would be string and this would be object. So this is how the config object will look like in config. Don't create the arguments like this. That won't make sense, because whenever you are invoking this workflow you would be not sure whether this is in or this is out. So if you are giving something to the input, you will say in, and assuming that from this workflow I want to know that whether the Outlook open was successful or not, right? So I will just write out underscore is uh, Outlook open. So now one more thing, whenever you create a boolean variable, right? So
Okay.
it is always good to create the variable like a question mark thing. So is Outlook open, yes or no, right?
Okay.
Is the config open, yes or no? Because from this variable I am expecting a true or false, right? So whenever you are having a true or false, you just use it like this, that you just treat it as a question, that is Outlook open, yes or no. Don't use the negative, assuming that is Outlook
Not open.
not open.
Okay. So you
Then you
want
will
to,
get
okay, so you want to be positive.
yes, yes, always be on the positive note. So because see, if I ask you if Outlook not open equal to true, what does that mean? So then you will think, right? So
Yeah,
it's
I
always
understand. And another question, because we
yeah,
are
mm,
we are the naming conventions that you're
yeah,
using. I
yeah,
see that you're using the in out prefix
yeah,
for the variable's name.
yeah,
But for in, you have a underline between in and Outlook open.
yeah.
When are you using that underline, and when are you not using? Because
Which one? The underscore.
yes, the second variable, its name in
Hmm.
is, and after is you have an underline, but
Okay,
after
okay.
after Outlook you don't
Hmm.
have an underline. So I want to
Hmm.
understand a bit, how do you use these underlines and why?
Okay, so if I do it like this, so the
Yeah.
purpose of doing it like this is just to read the naming convention. Otherwise, this first one is a good practice, that in underscore out underscore. Otherwise, if you will do it like this also is done. But to
Okay.
read it, to make it more readable, like this, because then you
Okay.
can read it properly. That is just for a readability. You can do it like this. But if I just do it like this, see, this one would be difficult to read. Can you see?
That one
Yeah,
totally agree with you. But
yeah,
I was
yeah,
curious about the
yeah. That
second
one,
the second
that
underline.
one is entirely optional. That how do you want to create? So
Okay.
if you want,
And
if it is readable, well and good. But if it's not readable, put an underscore.
okay, another question. Do you have this kind of practices at the company level?
Yeah.
Like how do you enforce them, and how they were established?
Okay. So prior to this studio version, if you will see, there is something at the top which is, you can see analyze
Yeah.
file. Okay. So this is the first thing that the developers are expected to do, that where they are expected to analyze the file. So for example, if I just go ahead and analyze the file, you can just use this
Yeah.
analyze the project or validate the project. Now there is one more code, okay, which is written using the workflow analyzer thing. So every developer has to pass his or her nugget from that code, and that code gives you a summary. And what is the summary all about? Is if you are not using the correct naming convention, you a nugget is not pass the code review. So first of all, a code review happens for the,
Okay.
the code structure and how the code is looking, and the next code review is happening, that the checking of this variables name, checking of the, this
So
naming, the all these things is done by a bot only.
okay, by a bot only. So you have
Yeah,
like a nugget package that which is referenced for each of the
exactly.
project
Right.
and does the analyzing for you.
Right, because if you will see at the end, everything is a XAML in the background, right? We can always use these names and we can
Okay.
check whether if it is following this pattern or not. If it is not
Okay.
following this pattern, you can always flag that an error. Okay. So assuming that you have to read this emails from the SAP, so you would require a config file, because most of the things are coming from the config. Once it is open, you just specify that it is open, right? Now, one more important thing here, if you want to throw any business exception, right? You will
Okay.
just use throw from here only, and make sure to use the try catch. This one, surround with try catch, because this will give you a good exception handling thing. But now, now if I talk about more about this thing, we can go in more deeper and deeper on exception handling. But as of now, assuming that this you are expecting some business exception, what you will do, you will just throw some business exception from
Okay.
here, and it will work, right? Now when you drag and drop directly any activity from UiPath, it will give you the default naming convention. Now that is a mandate, I would say, practice to change the name of the sequences, because whenever UiPath gives you an error, you won't be able to backtrack if you are having the default name. So for example, this activity, right? So this activity is my try catch for read
Read.
emails.
Okay.
Yeah, try catch for read the emails. Okay,
Okay.
and this sequence is my kind of a main sequence, right? So if I just drag and drop here, so if you will see here something, right? So if I just drag and drop it here, sequence, this name is also sequence. You do some automation in the catch. Okay, let me
There
just
is
add
another
some.
sequence.
There is another sequence. I
Okay.
right here, I go in the activities, I drag here, there is another sequence. Now you attempt to create a variable somewhere here, right? You
Okay.
attempt to create a variable. Now which sequence, this one or this one?
You
right
tell you tell me.
right, because it is incorrect, that's why it is not expected. So that's why it is always good to rename the sequence. So this sequence is inside exception, so I will
Okay.
type here sequence for exception. Okay, now in the try, you have put one sequence here, right? So this was inside this, so assuming that this is some core logic, so I will just type here, this is a sequence for my core logic, and this sequence was for my kind of a sequence for the main, right? Now if I go to the variables and I create any variable in any scope, assuming that I'm creating an individual variable, let's say int underscore counter, now I can usually use the scope, and you will see that which exactly scope are you creating the variable, right? That's why it's very important to get this sequences correctly.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
we somehow jumped to the exception handling part.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is a bit of down, but what you're suggesting is
Mm-hmm.
that you are using as a best practice this try catch as
Mm-hmm.
a global, as a main activity
Mm-hmm.
for every component that you're having there, right?
Yeah, for every XAML. So that
Every
depends.
example.
XAML,
Okay.
XAML. That is at the XAML level, right?
Okay.
Now it entirely depends that if you want to, whether you want to throw the exception to the parent, or you want to handle it here, or you want to rethrow the exception, that entirely depend that your logic that you will put it here. But it is always having that we are using the try catch for every XAML, because you don't want the automation to stop because of any unhandled exception, right?
Okay.
So it is
I,
always better to handle the exception. Yeah.
I think we should let this a bit apart.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
It's good
Yeah.
that you have brought in, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand, to follow
Yeah, yeah. We were
like a
just for
sequence of
this one.
steps.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have talked about the naming conventions, about
Hmm.
the how do you organize, about the variable. You say that you prefer to use for the arguments in out.
Yeah.
You prefer to give a name.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have seen for the variables you are using the type. I have seen something
Yeah,
int
correct, correct. Yeah.
underlined. Can
Yeah.
you
So
tell
that
me
means,
about that? What's
so
the this
that
one?
means that which type of variable are you creating? For example, if I'm creating an integer variable, I will mark it as int. For example, if I'm creating a string variable like name, so
Okay.
I know that a name will store a string. So if I will type it as string. So whenever we are naming a variable, it is important to type the data type and the name and what its variable is for, right? So for example, if by looking at the variable you can see that it will be storing the name. And don't mismatch, don't create a variable like str name here and you make it to boolean.
How about the data table? Let's say you have
dt
a variable dot date. Okay.
dt underscore extract data. Okay, and now you will say what about the date? Because date time is also a variable, right? So that entirely depends that if for our automation, for our all the developers, we have agreed that for the date time we are going to use like this, or for the data table we are going to use like this, because data table you will use more commonly compared to date time. So for date time, you can use it like this, otherwise like this, right? Now, if we will see, there is one variable called generic. Generic is also available.
Yeah,
So generic variable.
generic
Yeah.
value and object.
Yeah, correct. So if you have to create a generic variable, so at least you are aware of that why you are creating the generic variable. For example, when we use generic variable, so you are scraping some data from the website and you are not sure whether it would be integer, whether it will
Yeah.
be string, whether it will be boolean. So you extract the data, right? So you can just type the variable like generic or any of the convention. But the idea is whenever you uh, write anything, for example, I am writing here write line, right, and I have to print something and I print like str. Now I know that this variable is a string, so I don't need to
Yeah, it's
put a
definitely a
two.
string. It's
Right,
definitely a string
a
right now.
string, right, because we have changed it here. That's why. So I don't need to again revisit that what exactly it was, right? That's why. So that is how this naming thing helps you, this guy, int
Okay.
data type. Yeah, and then again the same concept here. Make sure of the scope. If you need this variable only in this scope, for example, don't increase the scope. So if you will see, the scope is in UiPath is coming like this. This is the innermost, then this, then this, then this. So this was the
Okay.
innermost, then read SAP, and then the try catch, and then there is a sequence main, right? So don't put everything on the main. Once you are, so assuming that I want used to use the name only in this sequence, restrict the scope to the container. Okay, don't
Okay.
put everything at a global level. So basically, if I do something like this, that is a global level now, right?
Okay.
Why do I need, right? So restrict the variable wherever they are needed. If they are not
But in the
needed,
same
yeah,
time, I mean,
yeah.
you're saying that you're
Hmm.
using the scope also, but
Hmm.
in the same time, you said that you prefer to split, to have it, to have the split done, a component to be actually split,
Yeah,
to have a single purpose.
yeah. So
So you prefer to have tiny components, but in the same time, you're using the scope also, and you have exception handling.
mhm. So see, those splitting will be done with the help of arguments, and
Okay.
this is only for this XAML in the input XAML. This one, okay. So that splitting and everything will be taken care by this arguments. So anything which you are giving outside and inside of the entire XAML, that will be taken by care of with the arguments. Anything which you are doing the manipulation within the XAML will be taken care by the variables. Okay,
Okay.
these variables are not going outside. So these are just restricted to this XAML. Okay. So assuming now you are done with this everything, now what do you want to do? If I go to the main, okay, now let's come back to the robotics framework now. So this part is init all application. If you will just read, open the workflow. Okay, let me just talk about one more important thing here. I forgot to do, that is comments and annotation. Why exactly this XAML is created? So as a human, or if I there is a third person who is doing the code review, if I ask that guy, tell me what is this XAML for? He don't know, right? So right click, there is an option to put annotation. Let me just go
It's
here
somewhere on
and
the top, in the top,
yeah, yeah,
more on the
yeah.
top.
I don't know. Yeah,
I get
annotation
it.
and then add annotation that this XAML will be something having the core logic, right? So that way what would happen, that whenever you create this, whenever you will be having this one, so by reading the annotation you can just refer that, okay, this is the XAML which is having this one. Okay, now don't leave the code like this. Commented code, if you don't require, just delete it. If you require, just enable it, but your code should not have the commented code like this. Okay, so that was just, I think I thought to share that we don't expect any commented code in any of the XAML. We check for this guy, the annotation should be correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this one. So for that, now if I come back, so if you will see, REFramework is also writing the annotation. Can you see this? So this, the best practices, whatever we are suggesting, we are just learning it from the UiPath only. See, it is used to kill the process and all, right? So if I just open to the init all settings, in the init all setting, what is done? This code is already written by UiPath. Don't need to touch anything. Just plug and play. It will give you the kind of a dictionary in if you'll go to the import arguments. Now if you will see, this will give you, and if it is also following the same naming convention. Can you see out config, in config, right? This,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is a plug and play XAML. Don't need to change anything. If what is the queue name? This queue name is, again, we have configured this thing in the our config. So our queue reading and everything will be done here. But now it is just checking, if you will see, it is just checking whether the queue name is available or not, right?
Okay.
It is nowhere checking whether the queue is created in the orchestrator or not, right? So you would have to add a logic here whether the queue is available in the orchestrator or not, because it is just checking whether the queue name is available or not. If it is available, it will just initialize that asset for you, right? But what if the queue name, as of now, this one, is not available in the orchestrator? So good practice, always check whether the queue is available or not. How can we check? You can just use the get queue item, encapsulate in a try catch block, and in the catch you can just throw an exception saying that the queue is not available. Okay. Now once the queue
Okay.
is available and all, we just go hit the kill process. In the kill all process,
So
you will see, yeah, yeah,
you're altering the reframework.
yeah, yeah,
Basically,
yeah,
as a
yeah.
default, you're
Mhm.
having. I assume you're using other kind of template which is based on the
Right.
reframework.
Correct, correct. So we have a template which is made on top of the robotics enterprise template to accommodate our set of needs. Because see, for different customer, you do not have control to the orchestrator. So in the dev environment, you have the control to the dev orchestrator. You will definitely go ahead and create the queue, right? But for example, when you deploy this thing to a customer enterprise and the customer forgot or misspells the queue, so how do you check? Your process will break, right? That's why it is always good to check at the beginning that, okay, if the queue is created or not. So that's how you can just keep the logic here only. Just check whether the queue is available or not. You can just read the queue item, give the queue name, this name, and if it is available, well and good. Not available, throw a business exception to XYZ guy saying the queue is not available, create the queue, or anything, any
Okay.
exception
Okay.
handling, right? Now we have this one, kill all process. So kill all process, what it does is just, if you will just read this one, this is just for the forced termination. So if the application are not closing gracefully, so for example, if I just close this Excel like this, save is a graceful close. But if I am getting some exception, then this guys come in picture and it will kill the process forcefully. Here what we have to do, it has just given us a template, we will go ahead and use the kill process here. So you just use the kill process and you just name the process, that whatever the process you want to kill, and you just give the process
Okay.
name. For example, if you want to kill the Excel, you just give Excel. That's it, right? So this is a force close. Plug and play XAML, nothing to do here. And I will just skip this part. Okay. Now this is, yeah,
Okay. So I
yeah.
was trying
Hmm,
to come back to
hmm,
this project organization. I
yeah,
understood what you're
hmm,
doing. You said that you are altering the reframework also.
yeah.
So you are using the number in the name of the
Hmm,
file.
hmm,
For the variables, I think I understood. Does it
hmm.
matter if you're using camel case or Pascal case? Uh,
That perfectly okay, as soon as you are giving the variable type and what is that variable meant for and the
okay.
correct data type, you are okay.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you're using the data type also in the variable name.
right,
That's what you
correct. Yeah,
suggest. Okay.
yeah, yeah. This log part is, very, we are supposed to use very intelligently, that what all logs you want to put. So add logs to generate it after this point. Now one more important thing, so whenever we do the process, right, so we have not put the logs anywhere. How would you know in the production that which step went wrong, or which step the bot has forgot? So now there are two things which comes in picture. One thing is you can add this log fields like this. Otherwise, the next field, that what we usually do in most of the processes, is we create our own custom logs.
Okay.
Okay. So those custom logs will log each and every activity which the bot is doing, not in the orchestrator, because orchestrator will then have a lot and lot of logs, but in a text file, separate text file or JSON or any format for that matter. You can just dump it anywhere, but a separate custom logs are created on the top, on the top of what REFramework or any of the automation project does for you, right? So you can always go ahead and use this odd logs field that will each and every step, like the, for example, if you are reading the queue and the queue was not available, right? So what I can do is I can always go ahead and log in message. Okay, I can just go ahead and log a message that this I have encountered an error that the queue was missing. Okay, assuming that this is a if else of the queue and the queue was missing. So that way this error will be logged in your orchestrator also. So the main thing which I wanted to highlight is you should have a track that what exactly the bot is doing at every step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so but also you're gonna have a lot of loggings if you're using this.
Yeah, so that is entirely depends that see why we put logs. There are two things. One is for the audit purpose and one is for the debugging. So if an
Okay.
exception is encountering, you should be able, so if you are okay to read the logs as a developer, if you are able to debug and get to the correct solution with the help of logs, then your logs are good. So it
Okay.
is like more is less. So if you put more, so that you as a developer has to decide that which one to put. You can't keep just writing each and every variable on the log. That does not make sense. But at the key points like queue was not available, the file path was missing, or the
Okay.
portal is not accessible, right, or the credential is incorrect, all these things you can always take care, a balanced kind of thing, right?
Okay.
Now if you'll go down, there is something called the init all application. So this is the XAML where you just open all the applications which are being used by the process. So the by default logging is available at the trace, so you can keep it like this, or you can just increase it to the info if you want. So here you will open all the applications. So for example, in our case, what you want to do, we want to read the emails, right? So we have killed the Outlook, killed the Excel at the top. Now what we want to do, we want to open the application. So you can always go here and use the activity called start the process, or you can just use the open application and you can initialize the things whichever you want. So for example, in our case Outlook, now I hope you understand why we have given the executable path in the config, right?
Okay.
Because I want to start the process, that's why. Now
Okay.
again, initialization, do everything, init is done, this is direct plug and play, no need to change anything. Now once this is successful, you will go to the get transaction data. In the get
Which
transaction data, yeah, this one,
okay.
right? So as of now we are in the dispatcher bot only, this one.
I think we
Yeah.
have tackled all the
Mm,
topics from
mm,
here.
mhm,
So you're adding to the queue
mhm.
the three emails. How you're doing? What's your approach with the attachments?
Okay, let me go here.
What are you put in that queue? And
Okay,
how do you download these attachments? Because these are attached to the email. And
right,
how do you
so
transfer these attachments to the queue somehow?
okay, let me just write a high level workflow. Okay, so you will use an activity called
Get attachments, I think it's called. I'm
get
sure.
Outlook mail message. Okay,
Uh,
I don't know, I have Outlook.
you're gonna have a mail message object type somehow. No, that's the.
Okay, because I'm not, because in my dependencies
Oh yes, we
I
don't
don't
have
have the
the mail.
email thing, right? That's why I'm not getting. Okay, in the project dependencies, I'll go to the packages, all packages. Now, this is one more thing to consider. If you're not using anything, don't import.
I think
So
is
if
the
you are,
third one.
yeah, UiPath dot mail dot activities, this one, we click on install, save. Okay. Now, let me tell you one more thing that we consider while using these packages. We always use the lowest applicable version and not the strict one.
Okay.
Because if you are using the strict one, then every time it will look for 1.10.2 preview. But if somehow this is not available in an orchestrator, your nugget will break. So it's always good to use the lowest applicable version from here.
But
That way,
why do you think UiPath is setting as a default the runtime the rule as a strict?
so UiPath will always give you the latest one. It will
Yes.
always give you the latest one, right? So it's always good. But as a developer, you should always use the one which is available and approved by your firm, and which can. So as of now, assuming that I'm using 1.10.2 preview and my orchestrator is not having this dependency, so it will break, right? First check the orchestrator, which all dependencies you have, whatever is provided in your production orchestrator. At the last, it is going to run on the prod only, right? So
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, this is quite clear. I was asking when you manage a dependency, when you install a dependencies,
Mhm.
you can say what's the runtime strict, right?
Right, right.
So except the version which is somehow linked, I'm referring
Mhm.
more to this rule. You said you're using the lowest applicable version.
Yeah, lowest applicable, and for assuming that 1.4, I have confirmed that this would be the lowest. If anything is higher is coming, it will accept, but anything lower than that, it won't accept. So
Okay.
it is, yeah, that is how it works. Okay.
Okay. Good.
So now we were just looking at how do we, write that code. So we will just use an activity called get outlook mail messages. Okay, in the get outlook mail messages you will provide this criteria of
Okay.
filter,
Blah blah
so
blah.
filter and
Let's keep to
everything.
the result. We're
Yeah,
gonna have a
so in the output you will get a list of mail messages. So
okay.
this list of mail messages will have all the emails which are satisfying that criteria. Now, next thing what you will do is you will use a for each item like this. In the for each item, you will use the list which you have got from above. Now you are having all each and every email. Now for each and every email, what you want to do, you want to save the attachment, right? So you have validated everything. You would have to put a if condition
Okay.
here at the top. In the if condition you will
Okay.
validate whether the email attachment count is okay or not. So here you will validate the count, here you will
Yeah.
validate the attachment, and then here you will just pass the item. Okay, and the item, since we are list of mail messages, so this would be now,
Mail
otherwise it
message.
won't. Yeah, mail message. Okay, mail message. Okay, system.net.mail message, this guy. Okay, and now here you will just have to provide the the folder path where you want to store. So assuming that as of now I want to just store it in a temp folder. Okay, so now in my temp folder I would have each and every attachment. Okay, so now the next thing, your question was how do I add the items to the queue. So now all these attachments are now available in my temp folder. Okay, now from the temp folder what I will do, I will, here you have got all the emails. So forgot, excuse me about the naming convention and all, we are not doing that here. Okay,
Okay.
so now here you get all each and everything, you have stored the data in the temp folder. Now this temp folder path will be an out argument for you. So it will be
Okay.
something like out underscore folder path for the
Okay.
attachments. Okay, so now
So
this,
the get invoice from email is generating this folder and
yes, and this folder
okay.
will be now an input for this XAML.
Okay.
Okay,
And where, I mean, this should be a shared folder, I assume, right?
yeah, shared folder. So now again this thing, again this temp folder path will be again in your config file.
So you have a restricted thing because the producer and consumer needs to be on the same network. This should not work on the orchestrator if you're gonna pub. I mean, if you're it will work in the orchestrator on premise,
Yeah,
but it will not work on the cloud.
it will work on the cloud, right? So whichever bot machine is working now that brings one more important concept. If you are saying that you are not sure about the business shared drive, right,
Okay.
your machine or the bot machine will always have the C drive or always have the my documents, right? So you have an activity in UiPath which you call the get environment folders, this
Okay.
guy. So what you can do is you can just get the environment folder, which folder, desktop, right? Get the path, store it. So this again, that depends on your implementation. You would speak to the guys that where exactly should we store the temp thing.
Okay, but
So yeah.
you're right. You can get the environment folder, but I'm
Mhm.
referring this folder path. This somehow that attachment
Mhm.
either by content or by path needs to go to orchestrator because it needs to be processed by them.
Yeah.
Right?
I am coming there. I am coming there.
Ah, okay. So
So
you're not there. Okay.
yeah, no, I'm not there. So as of now, we have just stored each and every attachment in the folder. Okay.
Okay.
Now in the attachment or in the attachment, what you will do, you will write some logic and you will get the data out of scraping. Right? You have get the data.
Okay.
Now in the orchestrator, you will create a queue. So what would be your queue structure like? Assuming that for the performer process, what all I require? I require the invoice, and I assume that I require the invoice number only. So I would have a queue. Okay, so the queue will something look like this. I don't know where I'm typing. Okay, so the queue will look something like this, where it will have uh, invoice number. Okay, the queue will have something called invoice number. The queue will have, let's say I want to put some start time maybe, or I want to put some extra information like who was the sender. Okay, assuming that, so you will create a queue like this. So this would be queue in orchestrator, and what would be the name of the queue? The name of the queue would be this guy.
Okay, so your suggestion is to only put to the queue some data from
Which
that
you
invoices,
require. Which you require. Yeah, not to put the entire data. Why should I put everything on the orchestrator, right?
Okay.
For my performer, I only require the invoice number, and for that matter, some extra detail I have put, right? So why do I need to put extra things? So put the items only you require in the queue, right? Now there is a separate best practices on adding the data to the queue, that why should you use bulk upload, or should we use the each and every transaction. But as of now, to cut short, is use only the data which is required in the queue. So for example, if you look at our process, in the performer process, we require only the invoice number from this all these emails, right? So we, in the queue, what will happen, that once our entire thing is done, it will just add the items to the queue by reading the details. Now to read the details, you can use OCR, string conversion, anything. At the last, you just get 3 details from the 5 PDFs, and you add those items to the queue. Correct?
Okay.
Now your queue is having this item. So now your queue, how would your queue look like? So your queue will have multiple items. So first item like this, the second item, the third item, the fourth item, like something like this. Your queue will look like the first item, second item, third item, fourth item. Now once everything is added, so this in this process transaction, you can control everything. Now assuming that your this thing is done, now if you will see, for adding this data to the dispatcher, this was not actually in a transaction or anything, right? So you can always use this thing in a linear process also. You don't necessarily be using a REFramework, but it is always good to use REFramework, because it gives you other details, like exception handling is done for me, the transaction thing.
So I think we should be quite ready with this process. Am I correct?
Yeah. So now the only thing is the performer, right?
Okay.
So the performer will be again on the same logic. You will have a project for performer. You will name the project performer. Everything will be happen, but only thing is you will have a new folder here, which we call the performer. So if you will see, first thing is you have to, but for the performer, you will have a separate config file. By the way, I hope now you understand.
Okay, yeah.
Because that will be a different solution. Assuming I'll just scroll down here, I will put a divide here. So now, assuming that this is my performer config. Now, what do you think? What all things we should configure? First of all, the browser URL, right? The browser URL would be configurable here. You will put the www thing here. Now, I have intentionally put something here which is called the credential, because I wanted to tell you the best practices for using the credential. None of the credential are going to be stored in a hard coded or in the configuration file. You cannot store it like this, username and password. Okay, that's a strong no. The assets, this credential will be stored in the assets in orchestrator. Okay, and the asset name will be now coming here. Okay, so you will store the credential in the
So your suggestion is that you're gonna have an asset in that orchestrator instance.
Yes.
Let's say the credential key should be system one credential, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, assuming that some credential. Assuming that the name of the credential is let's stick with the system one credential. So this is the asset name. This is the name of the key and the asset name. Assuming that this is the asset name. So you will create an credential asset in the orchestrator. This asset will have the user ID and the password. And in your code, you are going to refer this guy by using the get credential. And in the get credential, so if you'll just go here, right? So we have an activity called get credential, this guy. So this guy will expect the credential name, asset name. You have to just put the asset name from configuration file, and it will give you the username and the password. Okay.
Okay, so
So
for the asset name,
yeah.
you're gonna say the system one credential, right?
Correct. So this one would be config object and then the system names, and then it will refer to this, and which internally will refer to the orchestrator. Now, when we are talking about, when we are talking about this guy credential, I want to give a good suggestion here that whenever you are using the password, right? So assuming that I have got the asset name system one, okay, I will just type here sys one maybe, and then you have used the you have got the username, you have got the password. What is happening? I just press control and okay, so you have just got the username in a variable, so username will be string. So again I will create a string underscore username, and the password will be password, so I can keep it like this, control plus k password something. Okay, so now once you have used the credential, it is a good practice to dispose the password. Once, assuming that in our SAP application, what we have to do,
Okay.
we have to open the browser. To open the browser, I will open the Internet Explorer, right? So then I will use the open browser, everything. Now once I type the browser, I have used the type into activity, I have typed the password, I have typed the password, and the portal is logged in successfully. Now it is a good practice to dispose the password. And how do we dispose the password? We just use an activity and we just use that thing to nothing. Okay, that way you just dispose the password, and this applies to everything wherever you are using a big chunk of data. For example, okay, here in the okay, we'll come to that part, I'll just tell it. So as of now, just remember, whenever you are using the password, if the job is done, that's it. Now when you do something on the browser, right, we are saying that open the browser, type the credential. So whenever you use the type into activity, so now there is a separate set of good practices that come for the type into activity, such as, so whenever you are doing any UI interaction, when I say user interface interaction, wherever you have to interact, the bot has to interact on the screen, you will get all these properties, right? Never use hard coded like this. If you want to use the hard coding, use these settings in the configuration and refer that variable here, right? Make good use of simulate type, send window messages, all these activities. Click before typing can be used. Then simulate type, if you're working in a background automation, this should be checked, otherwise your background automation may fail. Okay, and so make good use of all these properties here. These lots of developer just keep it hard coding like this, and then it is difficult to debug. So always good practice. For example, as of now your type into is expecting a delay of 3 seconds, but in the production it is taking 5 seconds, so you don't want to come here and change it, right? Rather put
So
it in the config. Yeah.
okay, I get that. So why
Yeah.
do you change the delay after and delay before?
Okay, so what happens sometime, that the application is ready. So basically we use delay before and delay after that. uh, if the application is ready, sometime we have seen with some of the application which are the legacy Java one, the page is ready, so basically we go attempt to type once the page is ready, right? In UiPath we just do everything assuming that there is a property which is called this one, wait for ready, right? So we just use this one complete, and once the complete is done, then only we attempt to type something on the screen. But even if the page is ready, while typing, the it get messed up, it get missed out, it is not able to type complete. So that's why we use the delay before and delay after typing the activity. For example, if you have to hit enter, and after hitting the enter it is taking some time to load, right? 3 second, 4 second, you can always be on the safer side, put use those activities of delay before and delay after, this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is applicable to any of the UI automation you are doing, not only on the type into, but if you are using a click activity, everywhere the same set of activities are there.
So
Yeah.
you are using this approach. You are defining those two variables in
Yeah.
the config file,
Config. Yeah.
and you set for all the activities
Yeah.
that you're changing those
No,
values.
it's not. So as of now in the REFramework, it is not. But if you would have seen the previous version, there it was coming in the delays and everything was available in the config.
Why
So
do you
it is.
think? Why do you think they delete that?
I don't know. Say they always do the improvement. So I always see improvement. So if you will see, prior to this version of the automation, there was a separate XAML called get credential. So what does XAML used to do? Let me just give a background. that used to just fetch the credential from orchestrator. If that credential is not available in the orchestrator, it used to fetch your Windows credential. If Windows credential also are failing, then it used to throw a pop-up and ask the user for the credential. But now
Mhm.
you will see that XAML is omitted. So they work on the feedbacks, right? Hmm. So if you have seen the previous version, you will get it somewhere on the UiPath forum. So you will see that there was one more extra XAML which was called, get credentials. So as of now, that is not available. That's why we have to use this one. Otherwise, we could have directly used that one. So I remember using that get credential from REFramework. Okay. So
Great.
yeah. So assuming that we have opened the browser, saved the data, input the data, everything invoices, right? Now I have just import the invoices and assuming that this guy gives me a data table. So this is the point which I wanted to come, that whenever you have something kind of a data table and you have stored the data in the Excel, so definitely you will use a Excel read range and write range. Once you write range the data, make sure you make the data table variable as nothing. We have seen our bot breaking in production because of this thing. What was happening? There was a process which was downloading the data from the Excel. It downloaded the data, it has read the data, and we forgot to clean the memory. Now on one fine day, the Excel size was around 23 to 24 MB of file, which is having lots and lots of data. We created a data table, and then in the next step, the executor broke. So there is an error which UiPath throws that UiPath executor had stopped responding. So if you will look at the forum, you will see this. So that was because we were not cleaning up the memory properly. So with the cleanup, that was solved. So that's why whenever you are using with a data structure or any of the data table, this one, once the data is pasted, everything is done, clean the data table, remove all the initialization. So it's very easy, right? Just now I showed you, you just have to use an assign activity and type nothing. That's it. Okay, so
Okay.
so now you have opened the browser, type the credential. So now in the performer where you get the this one invoices name, now I hope you get
From
it.
the
So
queue. Yeah, from the
from
queue.
the queue in the get transaction, in the get
Okay.
transaction you would just specify the queue name, you will get each and everything. And now this is the place in the performer where your actual business logic will lie, in the process.xaml.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the process.xaml you have to just drag and drop your sequences one by one. So for example, first thing, assuming that I want to do we have not created, so let's see that
It's
this is
summer.
my
Yeah. That.
yeah. Okay, so you have to just do it like this one. Then now I hope it will make sense that why I was naming it 1, 2, and 3, right? Because when you create it at the end, it will make things easier, right? Like this. So
Mm-hmm.
in the process.xaml, it will invoke like this, and then you can just give the input to here, to here, to here, like that.
Okay.
And exception handling, everything we have done inside the XAMLs, right? We have shown it here. So that's why you don't need to worry about all those
Yeah.
things here. Yeah.
So we haven't
Yeah.
reached the exception handling.
Yeah.
We are still to the workflow
Yeah.
design. We have finished to discuss about the activities,
Yeah.
about the project organization.
Mm-hmm.
But about the workflow design, in UiPath, you can say a flowchart, a state machine, a
Yeah. Yeah.
sequence.
Yeah.
Definitely, I
The
have
global
seen
head.
that.
Yeah.
I have seen that you are using sequence a lot, which I like it, like
Yes.
for
Yeah.
simple things.
Yeah. But see, as of now, why I am not using flowchart? Because
Yeah.
I don't have a decision somewhere. So when
Okay.
do you use flowchart? Whenever you are having a decision kind of thing. So for example, if I was having a decision like, assuming that I will just tweak this a little bit, if the invoice is from USA, you have to do XYZ. If the invoice is from India, you have to do something. If
Okay.
the is from Canada, you have to do something. Okay. So now if you will see, from with the same set of input, we have to do different kinds of tasks. So in that scenario, you will go ahead and use a flowchart. Sequence will come in picture only when you have a linear or a sequential thing. So as of now, read input from the email, read the input, iterate it, store the data, sequence. But whenever you have something where decision points are involved and you have to do a multiple branching, you will go ahead and use the flowchart. Now state machines, I in my experience I have never created a state machine for my own project, because REFramework we are using the state machines only. So if
Mm-hmm.
you will see, this is nothing but the state machine only, right? So we
So
are, yeah.
okay, so you have never created a state machine let's say a new state machine, but I assume that you have
Yeah.
altered somehow the reframework.
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
I have created a tutorial in which I have teach that how we can use this for a linear process, and that
Mhm.
was accepted in the community tutorial also. So that is available in the UiPath Academy as well. So there it is available that how you can use this framework. So you can always go ahead and modify. For example, if you don't want to use the get transaction, you can just keep this arrow like this. It will work. So that is all thing, right? Now we will see. Have you wondered that what is this thing? Global exceptional handler. This is an interesting thing which is available.
Yeah,
So
you're still going to the exceptions, and
yeah.
I
Okay.
like it a lot. To be honest, I like a lot.
Because
Uh,
see, see this thing I get it from, but that you worry a lot about exception, because what I have seen from my experience, if we do the exception handling everything at the beginning, right, later on you suffer less.
yeah. So
So you are a developer, you know that, right?
I totally agree with you, and
Yeah.
the approach which you show me
Mhm.
with the bigger try catch block,
Yeah.
I have a video on the channel. Actually, I'm gonna
Okay.
put a link here in the right
Yeah, definitely,
corner,
definitely. Yeah.
where I'm using this kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using, to be honest, a lot of for the workflow which I'm developing,
Mm-hmm.
and especially I mean the reason why I'm using that, I'm not using as a default.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, I prefer not all the workflows to have a try catch, because for some of them, for me, it doesn't
You
make
don't
sense.
expect, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That
uh,
entirely depends. If you don't expect anything exception and this is just a plain thing, unnecessarily don't put the try catch. Correct. Yeah.
yeah, I prefer to use this exception handling for workflows
Mm-hmm.
where I create a resource and I want to
Right.
close it, especially.
Yeah.
uh, and maybe I want to throw it after in the
Mm-hmm.
REFramework. So the caller should be aware that I had a crush.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave a link here in the description with that. But I totally agree with you. I like a lot of exception handling.
Mm.
It got rid of a lot of problems when you
Yeah.
define the ownership. Who is owner for that? And
Mm.
this is what
Right.
you're doing somehow.
Mm.
You're
Correct.
splitting in more workflows, and you
Mm.
want, okay, this is the workflow which is responsible for that. So based on my assumption, if this one's crash, who is the owner? Who should deal with exception? Should this the caller?
Right.
So
and and
I
and
get
one
your
more
point.
thing. So if I assuming that you are getting some exception in this XAML,
Yeah.
okay, so you don't have to run the process from the main. You can always go here, okay, in this XAML. You can just do the open workflow. You can provide the hard coding values to the input arguments, and you have to just run this XAML. You
Yeah.
don't have to run the process from the main. So that is where the modules help you. Yeah.
So I will go back to exceptions. I really want to hear how do you exception handling. But before that, um, let's go back a bit to workflow design. So you said we're going to use flowcharts only for decision making, and I'm
Yeah.
glad. State machine, you're altering the REFramework, and actually that's
Yeah.
very good. I heard something which I like it, but I was scared in the same time. So you know that inside the flowchart, you can call a sequence or the flowchart.
Flow
You can
chart again.
invoke.
Correct.
But you
Yeah.
had a flowchart and you invoked another flowchart, and
Yeah.
that for me is like an inception.
This one.
No. You had a flowchart. This is a
Mm-hmm.
sequence. You had a
Okay.
flowchart. You have some
Uh-huh.
branchings there, and
Mm-hmm.
then somewhere you having another flowchart which you are invoking.
Right. So that is nesting. So that is definitely
Nesting.
called in programming terms nesting, right? So one thing, another, and then other, right? Kind of inception. So
Did you had this type of a use
no,
case?
no, 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 no. So why should, so if even though you have a use case, right? So what you can do is assuming that you are having a flowchart like this, okay, and because of some requirement you require to have one more flowchart here, okay. So assuming that you are having, there was a requirement and a business requirement and something happened and you require one more flowchart here, something like this,
Yeah.
right? So what you can do is you can always right click on this and you can always extract as workflow like this, okay. And UiPath has this feature, of very good feature, extract as workflow. You can just rename it to, let's say, flowchart new or flowchart parent or sub anything. As of now, I've just So now your logic will be here, the flowchart 2 logic will be here, and if you will see in the flowchart 1, you will have the cleaner and more readable kind of flow like this.
Okay.
So that is how you can manage that situation. But yeah, if the first thing is the code readability. So if I ask you, can you read this code? What is happening here? Right? So first step, second step, third step, right? If you are keeping flowchart inside a flowchart, then it will be difficult to read, manage all those stuffs, right? So that's why use invoke workflow. So that is also one of the practice that UiPath recommends, to use the invoke workflow.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the flowchart. Okay. So if you are using flowchart and you are having one more flowchart, it will be difficult to read, right? That is where readability come in picture. So this is where you can easily read it, right? This is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Now if I ask you what is happening here, you put one flowchart, then you put one more flowchart, then you put one flow decision, it will be difficult to read. So your readability is the thing, because, and you should not put everything in a single sequence. So readability and the division of the workflow work parallelly. So if I write this entire automation in one block, it will be difficult to read, right? That's why I have split it. What is the benefit I get from splitting? The debugging and all is one part. Apart from that, once I club everything, your workflow is readable. You can read the flow that, okay, this is happening, then this is happening, then this is happening. You can always put a debugger and then you can work the flow like this. Now flowchart, if you are having flowchart inside a flowchart and flowchart, see, rather you won't have a requirement like this, but still let us assume that you have a requirement, use it like this, invoke workflow, right? That way you would have a clean structure and you would be able to manage it properly like this. If I go here, you can just do it like this, and assuming that for the second part you won't have one more flowchart, so you can always drag and drop. So just taking your example, that flowchart and then inside a sequence, so like this. Now if I put sequence and I start putting activities here, that would create a mess, right? So why don't I just extract it as workflow and write the names here, that what is this guy doing? This is just a nested flowchart. So again, you with naming convention, we are coming to the naming convention again, and then nested flowchart. And then what you can do is always you can go here and add annotation that this is a nested flowchart.
Okay.
Yeah, something like this. So
I got your
readable.
points.
Yeah.
So you somehow, if you have like this type of requirement to have nested flowchart, you prefer to extract as a separate workflow in order to be tested separately. Correct. However, you are not against using this approach. You like, let's say, we're making an assumption that we need that. So you can use flowchart inside a flowchart. You can use a lot with sequence, mixes. But you're using invoke. You prefer to use like an invoke and then separate them. Okay. Yeah. So I like that. I totally agree with you. One question about the annotation, because I have seen that you're using annotations. Yeah. What kind of description you are using inside the annotation? Okay. So basically, what is the objective? So if I just write it here, what is the objective? Okay. What is the objective of this thing? What is the input? All right. Okay. And what is the output? And if you feel, you can add any remarks. So this is the kind of structure you follow, right? So by looking at it only, you can just guess it that what exactly this flow is doing. What is the objective? What is the input, output? And let's say you have to complete the code. You can just make it like this, yet to code. Okay. So that next time when I visit, I can easily go that, okay, this is the thing I have to code. So any remarks or anything you want to put that this is important, do not delete or anything, right? You just put for the other guys or who is doing the merging. So for example, when you work on a bigger team, you have to merge the code. So to merge the code, what you have to do? So whenever you are working in a bigger team, you have to merge the code, right? So to merge the code, you can just write something remarks to that guy that merge from this step or anything remarks. You understand remark, right? So okay, so the objective is what that nested flowchart is doing, what's the input, what's the output, and the marks eventually the corner cases or right? Yeah. Or the use cases. Use cases, anything, means whichever information you want to put here that you can put. Okay, so actually that's very good. I like a lot. To be honest, there are very good practices here. And if you would like to add something else about this annotation and workflow design, is there anything which we should like to add?
Yeah, I think mostly I have covered. So workflow designs are covered. These annotations are covered. So no commented codes. All this we have talked about. Yeah, that is
Okay,
all pretty all about. Yeah.
that's good. That's good. So I think we should continue in the part 2.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest to continue this robot development in the part 2, and let's discuss about the exception handling. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be okay. Yeah, because
Okay.
that's an entirely big chunk actually.
Yes, and we will see. We will see what kind of use cases we'll find there. So Mukesh, thanks for giving so much tips and tricks up to this point. And I would like to create these two processes, the statement which we started, and to implement exception handling, because we have brought in the topic exception handling. And to be honest, I find it very, very important. I will link actually in the description some of the topics, some of the video where I'm explaining this exception handling, because by the way, there is a topic from the UiPath forum, how the try catch block works, how along with the finally. There are some discussions there. Some of them they find it a bug, some of them they find the feature, and I want to hear your opinion on this. Yeah. But more about that in the part 2. For now, I'm really happy with what you have shared along with us, and let's discuss this part 2 and develop the robot in the next video.